With the committee's approval, I'd like to kind of give us a rundown of where we are and kind of do an overview, if that's all right. Would that be okay with you?
Yes, ma'am.
I need to just say up front that when it comes to discussing the Colburn, I need to recuse myself because you're one of my clients.
All right. And we might have some others that may feel about those when we go through the different ones. Thank you, Karen. So are y'all all right if I do a quick overview and I'd ask Chairman Gann, do you have anything you want to say before?
No, I'm just sitting there.
All right. Perfect. I want to talk to you a little bit about, I understand the purpose of the, we used to call the community recreation grants, which we had for years and years and years to provide financial assistance to organizations, including community clubs in Buncombe County, to support recreation programs in those communities, provided by those communities, kind of extending the reach of what Parks and Recreation could do. So allow the communities to design and help support some of their buildings with a little bit of money. We were in existence, had money for years and years, and went inactive. The funding went inactive as the funding tightened up. Came back, reinstituted the community recreation grants in 2008. There's a little bit of history there, and that was at the request of the Parks and Recreation Advisory Board as they did their master plan, and I'm sure Chairman Gantt remembers that. Up until that point, for years and years and years, it was $90,000. We have decreased it in subsequent years due to departmental belt tightening. So this year, and I believe last year also, we had $42,750. So part of what we've had for years. I remember some of the old timers on the advisory board talking about somehow community clubs would often just ask for very small items to help support the programs that they offered out in the communities. And that what a blessing it was to the Parks and Recreation Department to know that there were groups in the communities addressing some of the programming that we do not have the staffing or the facilities to do. So it's we've counted on those applications and those partnerships in the past. The timing this year is that this is in our departmental budget. So the funds must be expended by June the 30th, and that's this recreation grant, community recreation grant. This year we're getting a later start than we have in some other years, with the hope that we'll have everything, the reimbursement. It is a grant this year. The money will go to the groups in advance for them to go ahead and do the work they're doing, to have the purchases done by the end of June, so that the money is granted and expended in this year, in this fiscal year. I think unfortunately the delayed timing this year with the new committee and a new department has brought about a little bit of confusion with the community development grants. I'll outrightly tell you that we have two going on almost simultaneously. For that was an unforeseen complication that occurred. It was not by design, but by accident. At our December meeting of this committee, we reviewed the proposed application, the process and the timeline that Steve worked on with staff and presented to y'all, took y'all's input, went back and designed the information that went out. The notification of the applications was sent to community clubs with the app, those that had email addresses, and mailed to those that did not have email addresses. The application was posted on the Library Recreation Culture web page, and there was a public service announcement that was sent to the Citizen Times and Mountain Express. All of those were done as the applications were available. Now, that's history, now where we are today. Applications were received from 11 organizations requesting a total of a little over $43,000. The plan would be that organizations would receive those checks upon approval of the committee, and then they would be notified with a project completion date of June 30th of 2014. There was a spreadsheet that was prepared and worked on by Steve and staff that was to verify some of the documentation that was attached to the application. We asked organizations for their board list, for their project budget, for their agency and organization budget. We asked them to provide information. So there was a review that was done to make sure all those documents have been provided, and by the ones that were requesting. Today, as we discuss these projects at the will of the committee, you have the authority to approve some of these applications, all of these applications, all of them for the amount of money they requested. It is up for this committee to help us figure out, for y'all to figure out the funding that goes to support health and wellness and community activities, engaging activities. Moving ahead today, we'll get input, suggestions, and take your proposal forward.
Okay, so just a question. In light of, the CRA being formed and this amount passed budget last year, right?
Came in, yes.
This amount, so everybody kind of expecting that. Is anybody put in a difficult position if we don't fund these? What does that? It seems like there's a pretty good bit of obligation to most of these people. They applied last year, and they're basically reapplying.
So it's been very, very different through the years, Commissioner Belcher. It has really ranged. Last year, with the abbreviated process, we focused very directly on community gardens, which did not affect everybody in the community, and invited in different groups than before, some of the elementary schools and some of the community garden groups that were out there. In the years past, we've had more applications from youth associations, the youth leagues. We have not seen the number of youth league applications that we have in the past. We have not seen the number of community club applications as we have at sometimes in the past. So it has really been a varied group. I would say as the grant goes, I would hope that no group bases their day-to-day operations on a grant that would provide partial funding for a program or for an additional activity. And I think that's one of the reasons why, with a limited amount of money, there was a limited amount that we put in the application that organizations could apply for. So instead of saying we'll give one $42,000 grant, we said, how can we help make these different organizations across the community? How can we maximize the impact for communities in the county, different neighborhood communities? When we look specifically at a recreation grant in the past, our organizations that have applied have been more organizations. As we became the Library, Culture, and Recreation Department, it expanded the breadth a little bit of the applicants we got this year. Staff, Lynn's going to take some notes for staff. If you know Lynn, Steve has been working very hard to take the committee's recommendations from last time and to work with me and Ed on bringing this back to you today. So that's the summation.
I have two questions. In terms of the intent, this follows on what Joe was, I think, asking. In terms of the intent of this grant program, are we more interested in funding activities and facilities kind of in the short term versus long-term planning initiatives, that sort of thing? What's your feeling?
Historically, Karen, I can say that the advisory committee from year to year, as they grew, the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee really narrowed down their interests and how they wanted the money spent. So in the past, for example, and then help me here, one year they would not fund, I guess you could say, salaries for staffing for events. They did not fund anything like travel for a youth league to go someplace or scholarships necessarily. and they spent more of their focus on equipment and facilities, yes.
So my next question is about process. Once we as a group approve to recommend, then what happens? This goes to the full CRA board as a recommendation, and
Correct.
then they approve, disapprove, and then you all notify the applicants. So what is the time frame for that, do you think?
If the committee's recommendations today go to the CRA board next week, we'll be doing that by the end of next week. There is a time shortage here simply because these funds have to be expended before June 30th. So we want to make sure the grantees get enough time to do their projects rationally, and we also have a chance to check and make sure they did what they said they were going to do. So I think in this case, time is pretty much of the essence. We need to get this process done because we're going to be moving straight into the community development grant process.
And thank you for reminding me that has been a part of the process in the past that we've had a staff person actually go out to the facilities and to the agencies that have gotten grants to actually see the work they've done and to view their documentation after it's been submitted to see that they did what they said they were going to do.
I have a question. At least one of these organizations is going to apply for the other grant, much larger grant. And do these have to be tied together, or are they independent?
Thank you for asking that one. It's the same question I have. They are not tied together. These are separate grants and separate processes. So I don't know that we could consider one or the other. The other funding is for next year, which would be available sometime past July 1. So I do not know how many of these would, or if what their plans would be, nor is it a question that we've asked.
I think one that comes to mind, though, they did a fantastic job in their application is the art museum. You know, it's $4,000, and of course there's other funding that goes to the art museum. Is it better to take that $4,000 and give it, and you go to, some community center or something that, the frustration about things like this is that it's kind of like we had a meeting the other day about advanced manufacturing and the gap, the people out there that just don't know that the STEM school or whatever it is, or the education or the jobs are available out there. They're actually out there and they're sitting there thinking they can't get any help. I guess that's the question. There are other, and I'm not saying I'm against that money going to me. I'm just saying that's.
I like the idea that these are little grants and that this has been a transition year and that we have the opportunity to fund these and these other grants. I mean, I think we're going to get 3 or 4 of these that have a short one and then a larger one coming. I think it's wonderful if the CRA can help these folks in that way. I mean, I think some of these are little specific projects and then we may get 1 or 2 or 3 bigger projects.
I wish we'd had all the community clubs in the county and all of the youth leagues apply. I wish that had happened. I know that in some years in the past, we've had 25 to 30 applications to go through, which is been where we've had to narrow some down.
Did we notify the youth leagues?
They were, do you remember?
Not directly.
Not directly. Posted it on the webpage. And many of them have been regulars, I guess you'd say, through the years applying for different things.
I think too, in the last 2 years, because of having more stringent guidelines, those groups do apply. Just a little bit of historical perspective, when the groups that applied this year, 4 of these groups received funding last year. 2 are brand new, and from what I can tell, since 2008, haven't applied before. So the Art Museum, our Arts Council, Downtown Association, all of them have received funding in prior years. Arts Council is in fiscal year 10, maybe YSA in fiscal year 11, Beach Community Center in FY 10, so on and so on. So there's been varied history for the last 2 years. I think it's really been more structured toward a specific target.
Thank you. Yes.
Perhaps next year, we want to notify those youth leagues and community, things for kids.
How many are?
How many youth leagues? The 4 that stand out in my mind, 3 that operate on county parks and the Youth Soccer Association and UISA.
Which is in here.
It is. And so is North Buncombe.
I was going to say there are 2 of them.
Two of the 4.
So just thinking out loud, just because you applied for something, you were smart enough to apply for it, does that necessarily mean that you should have priority over those that did not?
It's a great point to discuss.
Not a bad point. I think if there's 4 that didn't apply, if there was $8,000 here that we decided not to do, could we decide to give $2,000 to each of those that did not apply?
Should we go up to the committee to take back the CRA board?
I mean, if they should have, and that's what this is a community recreation grant. By grant, I guess you can do whatever you want to.
I'd like to follow on what Joe was saying.
I'm not staking myself out on that, that's just, green light thinking going out there.
The grants that we have total a little bit more than the money's available. And just like Joe, I'm wondering if we were to decide not to fund 1 or 2, I'm not saying that's my position, but if we were to decide that, let's say we decided to fund $40,000 worth of grants rather than the $42,750 that's available, what happens to that other $2,750?
It would in effect still be in the departmental operating budget, so it's still there. And would still be available through June 30th of this fiscal year.
So that, to Joe's point, if a community club came, or if we wanted to give them all $500 in that scenario, or $6, that money would be available to
Yes,
them.
ma'am.
And $1,000 can go a good ways with some of these places. They can do a lot with that.
So am I hearing that if they decided not to fund something, that it wouldn't just roll into the next year and you add to the whatever number item for next year? That's all or nothing about you.
Because this is operating budget money, so it does have to be spent by June 30th. Or this year, my understanding is it would revert to the county general fund.
And that's in contrast to the development fund, which is,
That's
and
next year.
there's a 4,000 limit on this.
This is the 4,000 limit. There is no limit on the community development.
You have a spreadsheet of the history of what people have gotten through the years. Is that part of it? I think that'd be interesting to see. And I agree with Karen. I think anyone who's ever applied should be notified specifically. If they've ever applied, even whether we granted it or not, in addition to what you do.
Because they may apply one year and get it, next year and not get it.
Well, yeah, the emphasis may be on gardens, and people said, why bother doing apply? This is for youth leagues.
Well, I think what troubles me is you've got a handful of people that know you exist, and they keep flying, which there's a whole lot of other people in our community that know you can use the money, and I don't want to, I think is in our last CRA board meeting, I think we want to open this up to the universe, but we need to think about who fits this grant profile and who can be most help, and it's clearly focused on recreation activities, facilities, that sort of thing. And it needs to fit in with the sustainability program and all of those things that are criteria. I thought you did a great job, by the way, with the whole process. So I think we somehow do, whether we decide on a clean or annual basis, as Fran said, people bid in the past, this year we're going to fund arts, this year we're going to fund just kids, this year we're going to do whatever. to narrow that and then target some of those folks. And then I think you asking for the history of who's gotten what is very interesting. I mean, are there people on this list who have gotten multiple grants over the years?
Through two different programs at the same time, or?
Through just this
recreation
program?
grants, yeah.
Yeah.
And see, this year, they got 3 shots, they got 3 bites at the apple. They got this one, then after June, I guess they can apply again.
Yes.
And then they've got the community development after June also. I guess potentially the same project in a short period of time.
Do y'all have an opinion on who would, I know you have, you should put recommendations on it, but do you have an opinion of those that really need this money? I mean, that it would really hurt if they didn't get the money?
I just hope this would be a staff recommendation, not somebody who's been pretty much outside this process in the past. I think there are 2 options that look feasible to me, given the time we need to get this money moving fairly quickly. Would be one, all of these applicants submitted applications in good faith and pretty much met the criteria which were general that we put out. This was not a specific program focused year. So I think, my personal opinion is these all qualify. And the applications were put in good faith. I would recommend for next year, when we do this again, hey, we do this early, such as August, and then we focus. We do similar to what Fran and her folks did last year, saying this is going to be community club year, this is going to be youth league year, and then we do a pretty intensive outreach to make sure they at least know they have the opportunity. So my recommendation would simply be these are all good faith applications. I'd recommend you fund them this year, and then we go back and review this next year. If you don't do that, what I would recommend would be, let's decide which ones clearly that the committee agrees they want to fund. Then let's discuss what we want to do with the balance of that money that we can do quickly. In other words, if we want to focus on community clubs, then we say, all right, we're taking $8,000 or whatever here, and we're going to make another round of outreach to try to reach every community club that we get here from. And we could do that. But that's pretty much, I guess I'm feeling the pressure to move the money into the project.
I would assume if we approve them all, because they met the criteria, as you say, that we could pull $500 from the other CRA funds, because this is over the money allotted.
Yes. We'll find the money.
Okay.
Yeah, for that amount of money, we can find it. If it's 5,000, that's what we do. So we can find it.
Did staff rank these, and did I get that list, or is that one of those I didn't get?
You should have.
That's one of those I didn't get.
I got it. You got several sets. Have you got your set of
I
applications?
think what I would say by default is,
Yeah, I've got it.
the scoring is really more about completeness and thoroughness of the responses, not necessarily about whether or not.
Okay, that's what you meant.
Right.
Okay, so when you said yes, which when I looked at the applications, there was some other people had asked for money before, or getting it somewhere else. They were real thorough in what they asked, very specific, like Arts Den, for example, on the Arts Council, they were real specific on this,
Let's just look at one, for example, North Wycombe. I really support their project. I think what they're doing is really good. They have a good program there. The scores come low, but I think it reflects the responses. The responses were a little lacking in some areas. I think in regards to meeting the recreation goal, it's more about replacement and protection, but it's about protecting the youth, not necessarily enhancing the program. A lot of that I had to infer when I was able to read concisely and literally. So it's more about
But the other thing too is staff, some of these people have staff. It's obvious to me, that certain ones are gonna knock you out of the park, with their preparation.
There are some larger organizations that have great skills in being able to fill out the applications. And there's some of these that are strictly volunteer communities or youth leagues that have a board of directors. So sometimes it's about the merit of the application, of what they're asking for to me, and that they submit the documentation, and whether you think that it's a project worthy of investment of the county's money.
Also too, again, I'm not supporting one over the other, my position, I realize that. I think that for me, it's more, just giving information as much as I can. The Ashland Mountain View Soccer Association and the council on aging, the two things I like about their grants is that they're reaching out. They're actually providing programs that's in other parts of the community.
Yeah, I agree.
So
And
that was kind of.
I would like the projects we would have matching grants, so we were leveraging to add a larger amount to create. I had two concerns as I read through all of these, and I'm kind of like everybody else, and they're all great. The Downtown Association, when you read their application specifically, you know, they're looking for 2 tents, and they're looking for a cooler, and a pressure washer, and an extension cord, and I kind of have a problem with that. I wouldn't mind funding the tents, but I don't know, I just kind of had a problem with coolers and extension cords. So,
I agree with that.
you know, maybe we do part of that one and not all of it.
I mean, there's nothing wrong with not doing it all. I mean, if it's not specifically going to, you know, directed to, you know, the intent of the recreation, you know, the intent of the grant. It's not like it can go somewhere.
I think they're building supplies for their festivals is what I think, and I'm a big proponent of the Downtown Association, but when we got into the minutia, I had a little issue with that. I also have some concerns about the Arts Council request. That money is paying a facilitator to conduct their meetings. And that person works for Simpson Steel. And that would be sort of like, we approved a budget of $5,000 to pay somebody to come conduct our meetings $1,000 a pop. I just wondered if that money would be better spent in a community activity or facility way, to Joe's point earlier about what would you do with these monies otherwise. I will certainly love to welcome anybody else's thoughts.
Yeah, I missed that where it's just about facilitating, I'm on their application, I'm trying to find it.
It's under, and there's a letter from the consultant facilitator attached to the grant.
Oh, that's consulting. And it's $1,000 to support by engaging with the consultant. And y'all call that
$3,000.
for the summit.
The short conference is being held, sorry.
And that's just for the Downtown Association?
That's for the arts.
That's the Arts Council.
It's for the art, okay.
You know, the Arts Council is doing this Buncombe cultural initiative, planning vision for the future, and they have a committee together. Commissioner King was on that committee, but he's not anymore. They have a committee of various people that are talking about planning. I'm not aware of this. For the future of culture in Buncombe County. And I think the initiative is good. I just had concerns about funding somebody to run the Arts Council. And Tracy Kunkel's letter is attached to their grant.
So the concerns I heard from Karen was that she could support tents for the Downtown Association. And the Arts Council was concerned about facilitation and conference sponsoring.
Yeah, I don't think we should set that precedent at all. To pay for consultants for, you know, recreation appreciate grant.
Can we determine how much and how
Kind of more boots on the ground kind of
much?
stuff.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, I think that's good.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes.
I mean, I think you want, you know, boots on the ground stuff, you know. You know, you really do, I mean. So the art museum was, does anybody familiar with their kaleidoscope thing? What was your thoughts on that? That's what they're asking their money for, right?
They're asking your money to fund the creation of a kaleidoscope for a preschool program in the arts place.
Okay, and y'all make sure that this money goes to that stuff, right?
Yes.
That provides excuse.
I know about that.
They're going to turnkey that to the two artists whose resumes they furnished as part of the grant. They're going to pay Robert Gardner, and I'm assuming both those artists are local.
Right.
So the money that we saved last year for the was for their fundraising.
Yeah.
That's voted on every year, right?
Mhm.
So that was earmarked for that.
Yes. That's it.
The Ashland Downtown Association, all of their requests for their funding is for capital purposes.
Downtown, I would say not fund, and fund the art museum. Because that's me from my recommendation, because they're specifically targeting, well, we can't make consultants, I mean, we just can't do that. We can't make consultants, I mean, even though they could probably say that it's, you know, the art side of it is very good. But
Eleanor, how do you feel? I agree with you about the consultants. but-
I'm for facilitating this strategic plan. I think it's not immediately boots on the ground, but it becomes that once they have a process. And the art museum, I would give them part of the money and say raise the rest, because it's such an exciting project. I'm sure somebody would help them pay for it. I don't know whether we can come back and say, after they've applied, we'll give you part of it. Or whether,
That is a decision that could be made. And then,
as I've been done in the past.
yes. We
Yeah, I think
partial
you
funding.
give an explanation.
Yes.
You don't do the whole thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So
is the whole project for the art museum 4,000, or is it 6,000, or is it?
I understand it was 4,000 for the kaleidoscope.
That's total fund.
Right.
So the question would be, when were they going to do this? Of course, they got to do it about 30.
Yeah, I think you made them do that they'll have finished. Time.
I feel like, I would really like to take this kind of one at a time, even though they're integrated. I think it's pretty clear that the art museum is going to come back to the CRA for other, I mean, I expect them to come back in that community development big way for next fiscal year. And I don't even know if that's going to be the same thing as the Bill Capital Building request. I don't know all that. I don't know what they're going to come to us with. I think for me, that's a totally different discussion. A capital request of whatever, $250 million, whatever it is, than contracting for something specific for an installation in the facility that pays a local artist to produce it that benefits. An interesting thing about that grant, it only benefits 3,500 people. They got that number in there as an anticipated user number, whereas some of these other grants are benefiting many thousands. Maybe what we did is we fund several of these that have what they ask on. What's an interesting idea?
Would it be useful to discuss these each in order and write down the line? Would that be the committee's wish? Because I think we got the Art Council and the Arts Museum sometimes use them interchangeably.
I've got to meet Commissioner Newman at 11. I would suggest that you do the ones you don't like, since he's already screened them, that I'll leave with y'all, I'm just kind of sitting in today. The ones you have problems with, and then kind of, maybe set a policy if we, there may be a difference of opinion about the consulting. And then, say, well, the committee recommends you don't do this, there was disagreement.
On, just from the operating standpoint, trying to get this done cleanly, I would recommend that we, again, considering these are $4,000 projects, they're relatively small. I would recommend not splitting, in other words, saying we're going to fund part of this. Because for one thing, that's going to cause a certain amount more time to go by, particularly if we're saying you need to raise the balance in order to do the project. So I would recommend, Fran's made a flip chart that we go through and identify the ones we clearly want to fund, and then decide what to do with the ones where we've got questions. And again, I think it would probably be better at this stage of the fiscal year to simply say to reject a particular project, and then we identify what other use we want to make of that money. If we're going to focus on something else, then we have to decide how we're going to reach that group and do that. Because it does make me nervous going back into the negotiating process with these organizations on a $4,000 grant. It's not that much money for agencies.
And I do think though, for example, if the downtown association, we said we only going to give $1,500, I think they'd take it.
I think on some of those projects that have discernible pieces, that's different. I think I totally agree on those that have a budget that have got pieces that are independent of the other parts of their
Right,
application.
downtown association design costs, so that's possible.
I like both ideas, what David said and what Ed said, and for me, I'm in full support of everybody on this list and would just like to talk about the Arts Council and the Downtown Association, and I'm hearing the Art Museum. So there's the only three that I personally,
That's where I'm at.
so it's those three that we need to talk about.
I believe so.
What's wrong here? Going on.
I'm excited about some of these, I just want to say. I'm happy to. And the council, you got the council on
Beach Community Center, they didn't disqualify themselves, right?
Yeah, she was able to get, I was on her on Friday, started reaching out, because I hadn't got some information, it's probably not on the spreadsheet. And she indicated that she was not feeling well last week. So she slowly started trying to get information out. But the only thing I'm lacking right now, I still need some kind of evidence to support vendor receipts or something to show what the cost is going to be. What they're looking at is some modifications or renovations to that building, which the county owns. And I think it's just been tough trying to get somebody to give her a quote. So, one of the things I'd add too, is that you can certainly make recommendations to the CRA board, but some of these contingent on a particular condition. Maybe for them, it might be that you approve them contingent on them providing us that information.
Okay, so I think I'm okay with those also, but it's Kim's decided Karen's name. I just want to talk about the others. Those are easy issues, they're really easy. And of course, they need to provide, we need to make sure that we get proper bids in or whatever, in order to, for y'all to be able to give this money out. We have to make sure that we have proof of that it's going to the proper source, and we're being good stewards of that, even though these people really need that money. But we want to make sure it's not going to just pay the salaries. And I think we have to, that's a challenge in everything we look at in the county. We got to look at something that we got to make sure that we're we're just not handing money out. Somebody can pay somebody to go do something. I mean, it's got to get to the people.
I will say, on those that are building projects, which would be the beach, I believe Spring Mountain and Lester, all of those were very specific about them getting the proper permits that they need and using and following any specific building codes that might be in that community at the time. So they're giving guidance on that also. We just don't say somebody.
Okay, so let's talk about the Downtown Association, since that's the one that's kind of hit a little stumbling block. Okay, specifically, what are they asking for?
Which should be in the order that they're listed up here. Commissioner Belcher, the ones I handed you, should be in this. So the Arts Council, hopefully, is the first one I handed you.
Well, let's read it. Let's just do it that way. Y'all want to do it that way? It's easier.
Did I do it that way?
Yeah, you did.
Yes. Arts Council's first.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's
So there's
the-
this
Okay.
order that's in your packet.
Yeah, okay, well, let's look at the Arts Council then. Let's figure out what kind of regulations we have. Okay.
Nashville Area Arts Council.
Yeah, I printed mine, so that's why they're all, I got it.
Okay.
Some of these have other attachments, for the sake of it, not giving more maybe giving you more than you need or wanted.
So I think Mr. Part these, I think where you are is on the second page.
They serve people from 6 to 99, so have a real problem with kids under 5, and are under-year-old. It's their agent participant.
Where are you? Are we on the same?
Asheville Area Arts Council.
Yes. My concern is the last page of this, Joe, down on the Arts Council, this thing that says the CRA grant amount requested budget, and then and I would refer to them. Are you on that, involved in that group at all?
On this one, it says on the second page, the second box says, list sources and dollar amounts received. I believe that answers the budget question, Steve, or is that what you're reading?
Yeah, I think what I'm reading on that last page that Karen's on is that their budget of $5,000 is going to go to Simmons and Steel Consulting, and $1,000 of their money.
$4,000. Yeah.
I think that's their budget.
And what are they consulting for?
They're facilitating these meetings that they're having however often.
There it is, one back there.
Facilitating monthly leadership team meetings. Collaborative decision, guidance and support.
That's all fluff words, guys. They're all fluff. When you see those, the arms you go on. Guidance, leadership, those are terms that, and I will defer to the expert on that. But that. I didn't mean it that way. No, I did not mean it that way. I meant that you would know more about that. Being in marketing, saying you're talking to two, I mean, I'm 35 years in marketing, and I will not, I'm not sticking my foot in my mouth again. So, but I'm saying that when I see those red flags go off, because there's no substance to them. If they're going to get money, they got to have substance for what they're asking for, and that's, what are their goals? I mean, what are the goals of these consultants? Are they to take, to provide for, X number of children that want to improve, their depth in a certain part of the community? What are their specific goals that they're asking this consulting firm to do? As far as we know, we give them the $4,000 and they go there and they just consult for everything. I mean, it's just very, very broad.
On the second page of that application, you get the perspective from the applicant.
Oh, well, yeah,
Might be able to add some depth to that.
See, I don't see it. Is that? Oh, that box, okay, I got that box, okay. Mine are just all mixed up, so I apologize. Is this a big box, right? Yes. Got it, thank you.
What may make that application a little different from the others is it doesn't, in effect, it doesn't use something in the community directly.
It's not tangible at all.
And that would be, I think, reason maybe to view it a little different.
We funded them $4,639 in FY10. Do you remember what for?
I bet you wasn't, because this is a new initiative.
I think it's something different.
The fact that they are putting in $1,000 tells me that they value it. They feel this is worth doing.
Yeah, or that's, that's the down payment on the offer. So, I mean, that could be there just to make us feel a little bit better.
The best I could do would be to do half of this, but I worry about it. It doesn't feel good. It's not tangible. And maybe they come back and apply for a grant in a larger process with some better defined outcomes.
I would like us to be able to do that for any that we definitely don't fund or that we fund partially, that we tell them before Friday's deadline.
Do you
Why don't we
know
do
if
that? Why don't we do
I don't
that?
think that's a great, do
Just
you
say
know if they're
we're not-
coming Friday? Do you all know if they're putting in?
We won't know that until next week, but if we called and said this was the committee's recommendation, we just wanted you to know that, then we're leaving it to them to take the initiative to.
I tell them that there's not enough detail as to the benefit to the community in a cultural or recreational blank, whatever word you say.
It's too esoteric.
It's just not. And maybe they come back, because remember, we have an obligation to our neighbors on this money, that if they're not specific enough, it's not a bad thing to go, hey, we love you, but you're going to have to do a better job than that if you're going to get the money. So my recommendation would be to say no, but tell them that. And if they choose to reapply, they can ask for it again. They can reapply. Can it? Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yes. I
Is
think
there
the
a
key-
way, Ed, that you could contact Diane Pierce and find out if they, I mean, they only have 3 days to get a larger grant in. My bet is that they've already indicated they were going to. They came and met with me and told me they were going.
It strikes me as that's fair, that if the committee's not recommending funding, that we let them know ASAP, so that, and we just say, by the way, do you know that community development grants close Friday?
I'm with Commissioner Belcher and I vote no to that Arts Council with the understanding that the staff will contact
Because they could come, I mean, they might come back with some,
them. Thank you.
they might come back with some specific. One of the things that's really good about doing this, and I understand we're dealing with this, but one of the really good things about doing this is it takes an organization like this and they go, okay, we got it better defined. Next time, we're gonna have to do a better job when we submit, because we had a little bit too much, we weren't detailed enough in that, and they won't solve all that. They'll go and get that done.
Are you involved in that, Lord? Is anybody here involved in it?
So there's no other information. Okay.
Eleanor, could you be okay with that? Could you be okay with making that recommendation back to them if they?
She's not gonna hit me, she's
That's,
actually.
yeah, that's
Not
called,
gonna sulk.
that's called consensus, is when you you're not compromising, you're just agreeing with the majority.
Did you want to?
Now I'll delegate that to Steve to.
There,
The argument.
can I make one more point?
Yeah.
The end of this letter says the intention is that the Backward Cultural Alliance will achieve strategy and planning for arts, culture, and entertainment, and a leadership model that can be adopted and transferred to other communities, by which I assume they mean the members of the Cultural Alliance.
So there's about 4 fluff words in there.
I know.
Yeah, so what they need to define for us is specifically, we're going to affect this area, these people with X. And if they,
It needs to be measurable.
that's it. That's your word. It needs to be measurable, and that's not measurable. Thanks for saying that.
First, move on to the art museum.
So is anybody familiar with the kaleidoscope things they're doing? I mean, it looks kind of cool.
I think it looks very cool. I vote yes on that.
Yeah, you know,
It's also good they're targeting, I mean, just from a library point of view, they're targeting preschoolers.
Yeah, I'm all about-
That's something
I'm all about- yes.
we're very interested in.
thumbs up.
Yes.
That is easy.
Are you prepared to come to the Asheville Downtown Association?
I am.
Yeah.
All right.
I have a feeling
I just got
about the Downtown Association. Then they said, okay, $40,000. What can we buy for $4,000?
Look at the back page. All you need to do is look at the back page of their grant.
Yeah.
And that's what we're talking. And I'm okay with supporting the pins. That's $2,820.
Yeah, we'll take yours, because I can't find mine.
I'll loan them my power.
I'll hand it back.
And I want them a ladder. Really? Yes, it will. Because they're getting ready to put a canopy under the stage,
Yeah.
which is going to be permanently there for all time and not coming down, so people think that's temporary.
So
They're putting like a band shell over the stage out in front of the county building.
So that's even
It's the one we paid for.
Yes, it is the one you
Paid
pay
for
for.
that.
You didn't pay for the canopy, you paid for the stage.
to pay for the county.
A donor,
Some.
the Chaddock Foundation. I don't know, did the county pay for
Yeah, we
it?
paid some. Can't remember what it was a lot. Jerry knows. You remember what we funded for the canopy? I'll ask somebody knows. You don't remember? 25,000. Wasn't like, crazy. It was a lot. So this is, they want the money for this stuff.
Yes.
To do what with it?
Well, they said that their equipment gets damaged. So it's
Yes, so downtown association?
sort of
So they're looking at-
limiting what they can.
I'm sorry, they're looking at producing 50 community events, and that's on the second page in the big box. It says, please give a detailed description.
I mean, they do Hoop Jam at Richard Park, they do Downtown After 5.
Yeah, dig on the green and all that.
And we can easily verify if they want.
Verify.
We can easily verify if they want it.
What if we fund the team? Fund the team.
That's why
You okay with
fund
that?
tents.
Fund the teams. Then you're under budget, and if you guys decide that if there's another need that pops up, like, whether it be, if something pops up, we can use it. It'll go somewhere.
Now, they're showing 2 tents, one's 10 by 20 and 10 by 10, so you're thinking
I'd
about.
say the top.
Actually, there's 3 tents, looks like.
$2,820 would be the number. I think.
There's two 10 by 20s and two 10
Yeah,
by
you're right.
10s. So it's 4 tents and it's $2,820.
Okay. We need an easy button.
Hey,
1 hour, you're good.
Eleanor, was that, did I see it? Okay, all right.
Yeah, I think that was.
Now, this is assuming Eleanor hasn't voted on all the rest of those things like.
And I'm for everything else.
Okay, all right.
I would say that the board will take that recommendation into council. I think that's fine. You guys, y'all feel good about that, staff? Good, fine?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Can I ask, in terms of those youth needs plan, it looks like we don't have about $3,000 maybe, 2,500 left. Would it be appropriate for you all to listen and see if you hear needs?
Number 4.
There's three other, there's the Swanton Youth League and the Hominy Valley Youth League we did not hear from, but there's also some additional community clubs that we did not hear
So
from.
why don't we,
This is such
okay, why don't we just do this, guys? Okay, we got 500. This was 500 of the budget. So how much do we have left?
About 5,000.
No?
Yeah. It is, if we
We
didn't
didn't
fund.
have 4,000.
Oh, yeah, but we didn't do somebody.
Right.
You've got at least 500.
While she's looking this up, can I ask a question? I remember months ago, before the CRA was ever formed, that there were some folks that showed up at a commissioners meeting from various community clubs, and they were very concerned. Are they on this
Yeah,
list?
last they were one of them.
But are there others that were there that
We
night?
received a email from GFound, and I responded with just some basic questions, and we'll just try to get it quiet, because they apparently didn't get my email or my letter.
I promise you, Newfound, if you send Newfound a check, they could use it. You know.
I don't know why they didn't apply.
Well, it's such a, Newfound is total, I mean, it's got to be total volunteers.
We also did not hear from Buckeye Cove, from Big Ivy, or from, one more that I'll come up with just in a minute, Big Sandy Mush. Yes.
Would you all be comfortable with, I agree with the community clubs being the priority for
I
this
agree.
round. So let's us try to contact and have a conversation with somebody and everybody we can agree. And then, are you comfortable with letting staff negotiate?
Yes, and come back to us with a recommendation.
As long as you, yeah, I think that we should, as long as everybody in the county is represented, you know what I'm saying? As long as-
What I'm saying is, we will make our best effort to contact every community club which is not here.
And the youth, let's see, would you say the youth association, what you call it? Fran, I'm
Two
sorry.
more of those, Brian.
Swanton and the Hominy Valley.
I would contact them too. Okay?
But we want to be sure they know what they need and are ready to.
Yeah, if they don't have.
Be specific.
They have to have something specific that we can help them with, but we want to make sure we just didn't miss them.
Yeah, and I think so.
And then we'll come back with just a very short form for y'all, and you can.
Yeah, that's right. You just bring us back a one pager and, you know, and we're done.
That sounds fair.
Y'all concur with that? Sounds good. I make a recommendation to adjourn unless y'all have anything
That's the balance of the dollars.
else.
So it's $5,154.
And that puts us on budget, because we were $500 over, so that keeps it. Good.
Minus the 500 or 300 or something. So
Good, you
they
know.
just right around, a little more than 4,000. A little more than 4,000, yes.
Good. I like the fact that we're going to determine the need, and we're going to seek it out. That's much better than sitting around and waiting for somebody to stick their hand out. I love it. Good job. Okay.
Thank you, committee.
I'm done.
Thank you all very much.
And we're going to Waynesville Thursday morning.